Hi, and welcome back to the Real World Provider by Slim and Grace Academy. Let's talk about the when everyone does it becomes a problem. So, one of the most dangerous phrases in healthcare is also one of the most common. Everyone does it. Providers say it casually, staff repeat it confidently, and clinics build entire workflows around it. And for a long time, it feels reassuring because if everyone is doing it, it must be safe until it isn't. In this episode of The Real World Provider, we'll talk about what happens when common practice quietly becomes professional risk and why everyone does it offers zero protection when scrutiny begins. So, everyone does it is not a defense. It's not a policy, it's not a protocol, and it is not something boards, regulators, or investigators accept as justification. So, in this episode, we're going to examine how shared habits, industry norms, clinic culture, and informal practices slowly create risk for individual providers, often without them ever realizing they were exposed. And this episode is about the dangerous comfort of normalization. We break down how providers come to rely on what they see around them instead of what is written, vetted, and defensible. How working in busy clinics, specialty practices, aesthetics, weight loss, or cash pay environments reinforces the idea that if something is common, it must be acceptable, and how that assumption collapses the moment an investigation begins. We talk about real-world examples of everyone does it thinking, such as using workflows that were passed down from a previous provider without questioning them, allowing staff to perform tasks because they've always done it that way, relying on templates and consents that mirror what other clinics use, assuming that widespread industry practices automatically align with regulatory expectations, and something that personally happened to me, learning it from your preceptor. So this episode explores how providers unintentionally confuse normal with defensible. We're going to discuss how boards do not regulate based on popularities or trends. They regulate based on statutes, rules, documentation, and risk patterns. What looks reasonable inside a clinic can look reckless on paper. What feels efficient in practice can look unsafe in review. And what everyone around you is doing may still place your license squarely at risk. We also examine how clinic culture reinforces these mistakes, how new providers are taught to just follow how things are done here, how questioning workflows can feel uncomfortable or even discouraged, and how providers often suppress their own concerns because they assume that someone else has already vetted the system. This episode will break down how responsibility ultimately lands on the provider, regardless of who created the system, who trained the staff, or how widespread the practice is. We explain why I was trained that way, or this is how the clinic operates, and this is the industry standard. They all fail as defenses once scrutiny begins. We're also going to talk about how toxic competition weaponizes everyone does it, how complaints are often filed by people who know exactly which common practices live in regulatory gray areas because they're doing it themselves, and how providers are often stunned to learn that something widely practiced can still trigger investigation. This episode challenges providers to rethink where their sense of safety comes from, because safety does not come from similarity, it does not come from repetition, and it does not come from popularity. It comes from clarity, documentation, and systems that can withstand outside review. So if you ever thought like, well, this is how everyone practices, or I learned this at the other clinic I worked at, or this is standard in my specialty, or no one else has had this issue with this, and that's just how it's done, well, this episode's for you. Because when scrutiny begins, it doesn't matter how common a practice is. It matters whether it's defensible, and many providers only learn that distinction when it's already too late to fix it. So this episode is not about judgment, it's about awareness. It's about helping providers recognize how easily normal becomes dangerous and how relying on shared habits instead of written, defensible systems leaves providers exposed. Most importantly, it's about giving providers permission to question what they've inherited, to audit what they've normalized, and to stop assuming that common practice equals protection. Because everyone does it disappears the moment your name is on that chart. So stay tuned for the next episode, episode 5, documentation that looks fine until it isn't.